Today, believe it or not, we're gonna get a little bit controversial. I say that because I want to talk about what existing IPs could be really well done for an RPG. And that sounds a bit great, right? Like it's like, oh cool, like things that we already love going into a video game form, except you get stuff like this.
Questions. 3 ways to silence them. Fear.
But you also get stuff like the Knights of the Old Republic games. You also get things like The Witcher 3. You get Baldur's Gate 3. So there are examples of how a established IP can transfer over to an RPG and be done very, very well. So what are some underserved sci-fi IPs that could really do with an RPG? And what would that look like? The first one that comes to mind, we have to step into the Goram verse. Firefly was a far too short-lived show that led to an underrated but excellent movie in Serenity. It is a sci-fi western drama set in the distant future of 2517, following the end of a devastating civil war. It's set in a new solar system with hundreds of new Earths from dozens of planets and hundreds of moons that humans have colonized, with central planets all aligned under the alliance that is made up of the 2 remaining superpowers, the United States and China. It is a series steeped in moral, ethical, and political questions, a theme that works very, very well with RPGs, and a theme that is often basically the basis of most sci-fi, a way to explore those moral and ethical questions with lasers.
Come down, empty that vault! Yeah, give me your authorization password. Okay.
Firefly works so well, I think, not just because of its deep lore and characters, but because it makes such a home not just in space, but on planets. It is a sci-fi MMO that has some of its best moments firmly grounded, for lack of a better term, but also because of the lore behind it that lends itself to the Western frontier feel of the game, but in space. Of those terraformed planets, many of them on the Outer Rim only got the first steps of terraforming, leading to a dry, Western, harsh environment. This, coupled with the gunslinging, smuggling, and simmering post-Civil War tensions, make for a prime environment for an emotional, shocking, and darkly comedic RPG, especially when you throw in the Reavers, the cannibalistic group of nomadic humans, and their really freaking creepy ships. The only question would be, who would we follow? Would we follow predetermined stories like those of Mal and Zoe or the crew? Or would this be best served by original characters, but within the world? If there's any studio I'd trust to do justice to the game, especially with original characters, it's actually going to be Larian, because I think it might work very well if new characters were made in a CRPG style turn-based RPG that focused on the story, not the flash. Larian has proven that they can handle incredibly dark themes, but do so with some well-timed humor. But since Larian is a bit of a cop-out studio, I would also say perhaps Owlcat could do pretty well with this, as they've already dabbled a little bit with Warhammer 40k, after all. They know how to convert space into a CRPG format.
See, I married me a powerful, ugly creature.
How can you say that? How can you shame me in front of new people?
If I could make you prettier, I would.
You are not the man I met a year ago. Now think real hard. You've been bird dogging this township a while now. They wouldn't mind a corpse of you. Now you could luxuriate in a nice jail cell, but if your hand touches metal, I swear by my pretty floor bonnet, I will end you.
This next one, though, I'm less certain of exactly how it would best play out as an RPG, but I know that I really, really want to see it. Firefly is often pointed to as a series that didn't last long enough. After all, it only got 1 season, though the movie neatly tied up many of the hanging storylines. The second sci-fi IP that I think deserves an RPG was actually created after a movie and went on for an incredible 10 seasons. Stargate SG-1. Stargate is the multimedia sci-fi series that takes place firmly in the present, or I suppose the recent past now that it's, in the 2000s. But it takes the cast of the series far, far afield through the use of an alien device known as the Stargate. The Stargate is tied to multitudes of planets all throughout space. The connection to the rest of the universe brings forth incredible threats like the Goa'uld, the Replicators, and later, the Ori. But it gets so much better because Stargate pulls from Egyptian, Greek, and Norse mythology, among others. It's not just some simple military first-person shooter-leaning romp through other cultures. Throughout the Stargate series, there are moral and political and ethical questions. It's one of those series that was tailor-made for a Telltale-style game, I think, in the vein of their Walking Dead series. But given the changes at that studio, its closure and then reopening, I'm not sure if they'd be able to do it justice. But that's the type of game format that seems a best fit, although I'm open to any kind of suggestion here. However, a story-focused visual novel type RPG with deep and meaningful decisions that result in cascading impacts, well, it just kind of seems to fit. Perhaps the new developer made up of former Telltale devs, Dramatic Labs, could give it a try. That team just released their very first game, a Star Trek game, so at least there's some connection there. I wanted to single out this story approach to this because we actually did just recently get a Star Trek game, but I don't think it was approached from the way that makes sense with the series. It was approached as a tactical stealth RPG, RTS type game. The game is called Timekeepers, and I think it's just kind of focusing on the wrong things. It's not focusing on those tough decision-making things at the heart of that sci-fi series. It seems more focused on stealth combat. Stealth and combat are certainly part of Stargate, but at least for me, it's never been the part of Stargate. In fact, most of Stargate was all about how they interacted with different cultures and what kind of moral decisions they made when they did so. But I have linked the Steam page down below for that game if you want to check it out, if that sounds like something you would personally enjoy from Stargate. Now, there's a couple other sci-fi IPs that I thought could really work as RPGs, but I wasn't able to find the right mix of how these would work best. And some of them I just threw up my hands and I want this game, but I don't know what I even want. I don't even know how to articulate what I would want in an RPG for this IP. So these are the honorable mentions. First, we have to talk about the Orville, which is very much like Star Trek, which is also going to be in our honorable mentions list. But I would love to see an Orville RPG that leans a bit more into the humor of it, that has all of the same kind of deep, weighty decisions, but also has plenty of humor and banter. I'm just not sure exactly what kind of RPG would suit it best. Similarly, I am completely and utterly stumped by the longest running sci-fi ever, Doctor Who. There's just so much prime real estate in that series, but what would you pick? Where would you pick? How would you go about it? But holy hell, wouldn't a horror game just called Don't Blink or even Are You My Mummy really work out very, very well for that series? Or perhaps a mystery puzzle game in a library. Tough choices with that series, but also lots of different things that they could explore if they wanted to. Star Trek is one of the weird ones where it doesn't seem like we've had enough games about it. We've had plenty of games. There's even an MMO for Star Trek, but it still doesn't feel enough for how big that IP is. They've even had a very recent game that would fall along with some of these requests. Star Trek Resurgence from the former Telltale devs, which has received pretty mixed reviews largely due to its QuickTime events, but is currently sitting at positive on Steam. I'm intrigued enough to personally pick that game up and see what those storytellers can do with a visual novel style based RPG, but I would like to see more. I would love to see a CRPG type game for Star Trek, or even a more focused narrative driven story RPG from Star Trek. One with space combat would be cool too. But there are tons of other sci-fi IPs out there, from Battlestar Galactica to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to hell, Futurama. If South Park could make an RPG, why couldn't Futurama make an RPG? But there are tons of sci-fi IPs out there, and I want to hear from you. What IP would you really love to see? For basically, what IP would you love to see in an RPG format? And how? What kind of game would that look like to you? Let us know down in the comment section below. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'm gonna go just hope that somehow we get something new from Firefly at some point, somewhere.